Okay, so I have a question for everyone. How many times a day on average do people tap, swipe, or scroll on their phone? A lot. Give me some numbers. Let's just throw some out there. One. All right, if you're that one person, that is pretty crazy. What'd you say? 200, okay. 1,000? 10,000? 25,000? Any other numbers? Zero? I heard a zero out there. Okay. All right. Well, let me tell you, it's a little more than we might think. On average, 2,617 times a day on average does a person touch, swipe, or scroll on their phone. For people who maybe be more like me, I'm just going to be honest here, I kind of land in the second category where I use my phone a lot. 5,427 touches a day. Now, can I remember all 5,000 of them? I'm not entirely sure. But we use our phones a lot. Check this out, though. Per year, if you take that number and make it out to a year average, the average person touches, swipes, scrolls, interacts with their phone 1 million times each year. And on the heavier side, 2 million times this year. And yes, you read and you heard that correctly. That does say the word million on there. Because normally when people refer to millions, it's usually an exaggeration. For example, when you ask someone, especially if a kid, to rank their favorite food on a scale from 1 to 10, they're often like, oh my gosh, I love it 1,000,000%. Like, I love it 100 million. Or maybe for me, when it comes to The Office, I go, oh, The Office is my favorite TV show. I've watched it about 1,000,000 times. Usually when we talk about million, it's on average. It's an exaggeration, but not according to the study by D-Scout. 1 million touches on average per year does the average person look on their phones. And so we're on our phones a whole lot. But the study doesn't stop there. Check out this chart above me. Starting on the left-hand side, it's talking about the touches per day and at what time of day you see in the chart above me. So on the far left, it starts at midnight, and then all the way to the right, it starts at 11 p.m. So it covers the entire day. And as you look at this chart, and as I looked at it, I saw something interesting about this chart. What I did is I circled some of the peaks in the red circles. I circled some peaks for some interesting points about the study, and I noticed something. I noticed that these times right here with the red circles correspond with what we would classify as important parts of our day, whether that be breakfast, lunch, dinner, late evening. In fact, if you look right over here, this circle right here, that's 3 o'clock in the morning. And so that would be an important part of the day. Who here likes sleep? Who here likes to get sleep? Okay, a lot of hands came up. So if you look at this number here, that is about 8,000 touches per day at 3 o'clock in the morning when people are supposed to be sleeping. So looking at this chart, then looking at as we answered this question, we see something important about us as humans. And what we see is that humans are wired to be drawn to something. This case is talking about cell phones and technology, but we are naturally going to be drawn or desiring something. So let me ask you before we continue, what are some other things that we can be drawn to? It may not be technology for you. What are some other things we could be drawn to? Music. People can be drawn to music, absolutely. Reading, absolutely. Anyone else? What are some things that we can be drawn to? TV, yes. Food, I mean, today's the fourth Sunday meal, and so since Bryce was doing the welcome, I don't normally get to say, I don't know about you, but I like free food. Anyone else? Video games, yeah, I'm a huge game person. Anyone else? Anything else that we could be drawn to? Exactly, sunlight. Hey, that's a good thing. I mean, I like to be tan. I don't like to be a pale white ghost, but it does have to happen during winter. But anything else? One last call. Shopping, yeah. We could be drawn to so many things, not just technology we see in this chart, but it's just to show an example. And so the question we need to wrestle with this morning is, what are you being drawn to? What are you being drawn to? What are you seeking after, and what are you going towards? You see, James writes in his book in the Bible about being drawn to something. And we're going to see how this connects with us to living up when it comes to living our life here at RAC, living your life in general, living up. And so if you have your Bibles with you, or if you're watching online, if you have an app as well, we are going to be in James chapter 4, verses 7 through 8. Excuse me. I will also have the verses up on screen as well for people who are watching in person and online. James chapter 4, verses 7 and 8. Starting at verse 7, it says this: "Submit yourselves therefore to God, resist the devil, and he will flee from you. Draw near to God, and he will draw near to you." Draw near to God, and he will draw near to you. We see here right there the words I haven't read: draw near to God, and he will draw near to you. We see this truth in our life. The only way to live up, and we've been talking about our series, Living Up, In, and Out, the only way to live up is by drawing near to God. Drawing near to God, having intimacy with the Father. That's what it means to live up. Because as you just saw with the study on how many times our people touch their phone in a day, we are all drawn to something. And James here is pleading in this passage that we should be drawn by God. That we should be seeking and desiring God, submitting to him and growing in our relationship with him. Submitting to him and resisting the devil when he tries to pull us away to draw us to something else. And so when we look at the phrase, draw near to God, I want to take a look at what the word is in the Greek. Because the word in the Greek is engizo. And what this word means is to join one thing to another. To become acquainted with one another. And so if we put this back into verse 8, we see that we are to be joined together with God. That we are to be acquainted with him, so familiar with who Christ is. And the only way in which we can do that in order to live up is by actually spending quality time intimately with him. Let me ask you a question. By a show of hands, have you ever found yourself talking in the same way that your friends do? Oh, sorry, that is the wrong question. I'm so sorry. How many of you had parents that told you couldn't hang out with a certain people or friend group? Now, for parents, how many of you have told that very same thing to your kids, that you can't hang out with certain people? Why is that? Why do we say that we can't hang out with certain people, certain friend groups, or certain friends? Why do you do that? Fear. Fear of what? Okay. That's a very good answer. Why else? Why else do we not tell people to hang out with certain people? Bad influence. Okay, awesome. Let's hang on that for just a second right there. How many of you heard that before? Oh, they're a bad influence. They'll rub off on you. Did you know that there's actually a scientific reason behind that? That scientific reason is called emotional contagion. Emotional contagion. Emotional contagion, when you hear the word contagion, what does that word sound like a lot? Contagious, okay? So keep that in mind. Keep contagious in the back of your mind for a second. Emotional contagion is a form of social contagion that involves the spontaneous spread of emotions and related behaviors from one person to another or in a larger group. Emotions can be shared across individuals in many ways, both implicitly or explicitly. In other words, the more you spend time with someone, the more you consciously or unconsciously begin to be like them. Have you ever found yourself talking in the same way that your friends do or people that you're close to? Maybe you dress like them or you act like them? Or better yet, you realize you did the one thing that you promised yourself would never happen. You turned into your parents. Sometimes you're not the one to realize that you're acting like someone else until someone brings it up. All this is because it goes back to this idea of intimacy. The deep relationship that you have with someone, whether it's a friend, whether it's a spouse, that deep relationship you have with someone results in you being like them. It becomes contagious, and more often than not, you can't not act like them. That's the idea of draw near. that James talks about in this passage. That we have such an intimacy with Jesus, that we're spending so much time with him that all of who we are becomes more like Jesus and the amazingness of all of who he is. That our intimacy with Jesus is so contagious that when people see you, they see that you have been with Jesus. Charles Spurgeon says this: drawing near is not one isolated act. It is nor merely turning to God and saying, I have come to him. The expression is draw. It's not a single act. It's the drawing, the coming, the habitual walk, going on and on and on, so as long as we are on earth. This continual drawing near, it's not just one isolated act. It's a continual thing. You're just having an awesome, awesome time continually hanging out and growing in intimacy with Jesus. And when it comes to this drawing near and this idea of living up because of the intimacy we have with the Father, all this reminds me of my life verse, which comes from Acts 4:13. Acts 4:13 says this: Now when they saw the boldness of Peter and John and perceived that they were uneducated common men, they were astonished, and they recognized that they had been with Jesus. Do people recognize that you have been with Jesus? Do people realize that you have been with Jesus, that you are spending time intimately with the Father, and that you are drawing near to him and growing in relationship with him? And people can be like, yeah, you're different. And then you can say, it's because I'm with my Father. Chapter 4, verse 8 of James says to draw near to God, and he will draw near to you. That is how we're supposed to live up intimately with him. There's another reason, as we've been talking about living up, talking about intimacy with the Father, there's another reason why it's important to draw near to God. And it comes from verse 7. Verse 7 says, Submit yourselves therefore to God, resist the devil, and he will flee from you. We see that it says to resist the devil and submit to God. And so the question we need to ask ourselves is why? Why are we supposed to do that? Well, the context of this passage of James chapter 4, it all talks about battling against worldliness. And in verse 4, it talks about having friendship with the world. And that friendship with the world, being a friend of the world, makes himself an enemy of God. Let's focus on the word friendship really quick. The word friendship connects with the idea of pleasure. But what it's talking about, when it talks about the word pleasure, it's talking about finding pleasure in the things that the world has to offer that draws you to it. However, James is writing this because our call as believers is to find our pleasure and satisfaction in life from drawing near to God and not drawing near to the world. You see, finding pleasure in the things that the world has to offer instead of God, it ultimately doesn't satisfy you. You're always wanting more. You're always trying to give in to something in order to get more. But with Jesus, you have all you need. Drawing near to God, pursuing the pleasure and the joy and the hope and the satisfaction that comes with spending time with the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords, that is what James is pleading us to do. Now, I want to clarify something here because I don't want to say something that's not true. 2 weeks ago, Pastor Bryce talked about the verse 1 Corinthians 10:23, which says that we are allowed to do anything, but not everything is good. Not everything is beneficial. And the reason why I say that is because with this verse in mind, we then see that James is not saying that it is wrong to interact with the world. James is not saying, oh, you can't interact with the world and be in it. Because if we couldn't be, then how are we supposed to spread the gospel with people? How are we supposed to build relationships with people to invite them to share the hope here in the gospel if we're not interacting with them? I wanted to clarify that for just a moment. Because what James is pointing to is when it talks about pleasure, he's talking about the core issue of where is your joy and satisfaction coming to? Is your joy and satisfaction coming from the world and what that has to offer, or is it coming with Christ? Because when it comes to drawing near to God, we have all that we need. So let me ask you then. We've been talking about this idea of drawing near then. What do you think it looks like to draw near to God? What do you guys think? Share some answers. What do you think it looks like to draw near to God? Okay, spend time with Him, yeah. Hey, you could definitely do that. Anything else? Daily devotion. Okay, anything else? Serve others. That's a great way. Because Jesus came to serve and not be served. I love it. Yeah. Fellowship, yeah. God created us to be in community, and so we can spend time with God by spending time with the people that He's created. Exactly. I like that. Anything else? Obey what He shows. Yeah, actually follow in obedience. Exactly. When it comes to drawing near to God, the ways that we can do that are endless. We all connect with God in certain ways, and that's totally okay. Some people like to play music. Some people like to go outside for walks, anything like that. Some people like to spend time with the community and talk about what God has been doing in their life. All of that is totally okay. What matters is that when we are doing that, we are focusing on centering those things towards Christ. So that when we do that, as we lift our eyes to Him and focus on Him, we are drawing near to Him, recognizing that He is our hope, He is our joy, He is our satisfaction, because we are drawing near to Him. We are growing in our intimacy with Him. Because in order to live up, as we've been talking about our series, we need to draw near to God. We need to grow in intimacy with Him. We need to spend time with Him. We need to grow in relationship with Him. And so as we've been talking about drawing near to God, it's important to ask ourselves, how can we then live that out this week? How can we live out living up and drawing near to God this week? Well, if we take a look back at verses 7 and 8 of James chapter 4, we see this progression. And it comes in these three things: submit, resist and flee, and draw. Submit, resist and flee, and draw. Which one of these three do you need to work on this week? For submit, is there anything that you need to submit and let go of and give to God this week? Is there anything you need to submit of, whether it's truth or something like that? Is it something you need to move forward and submit and give it up to God? Recognize that you're not in control, but He is in control. For resist and for fleeing, is there anything that you need to back away from this week? Is there anything that you need to take a step back and not give in to whatever that may be? To not give in to that temptation? Is there something you need to step back from this week? And finally, draw. How can you draw near to God this week? How can you do that? A good tangible step for this is simply just take 5 to 10 minutes of your time this week to have a conversation with Him. Whatever that may look like, whatever that may be, carve out that time and have an amazing encounter with the amazing glory that is Jesus Christ, the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords. Which one of these three do you need to work on this week? And as we wrestle with these things, we all can be in different places. Some of us may not even be in the place to draw near to God right now. That's not where we are in life. And so first we need to submit to Him before we can move forward. Some of us may be wanting to draw near to God, and we have no problem submitting to Him, but there's something that is holding us back from doing that. There is something or someone that causes us to shift to be drawing near to that instead of being drawn near to God. Some of us are in a place where we need to simply just put a pause button in our life and carve a little bit of our time to draw near to Him. Even if it's 5 minutes, carving out a time to be intimate with the one who has created us. Because we've been talking about living up. Our big focus of here at RIC, glorifying God, living up. It's not an easy thing to do sometimes. In fact, it can be pretty difficult, actually. And although it may not always be easy, intimacy with the Father Intimacy with God that comes from living up is far more worth it than anything else out there by far. Because Jesus is better than anything we could possibly ever imagine. Living up is all about drawing near to God and having intimacy with the Father because he is worthy of nothing else. He is our joy, he is our hope, he is our identity, and he is our true satisfaction. Drawing near to God.